And new reaction tonight after the consequential Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. Democrat-backed Susan Crawford beat Republican-backed candidate Brad Schimel in the most expensive state Supreme Court election ever. Tonight, Danny Spiewak looks at the biggest takeaways and what they could mean moving forward.
Thank you.
On Tuesday night, Judge Susan Crawford earned a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court by defeating a candidate backed by President Trump and Elon Musk.
Our courts are not for sale.
Handing Democrats a sorely needed victory following their poor performance in November.
It wasn't even close. They got wiped out in Wisconsin.
For perspective, we turned to our two political analysts. First, former DFL state lawmaker Jeff Hayden.
Jeff, in terms of the Democratic Party, what do you think this means?
I think what it shows is how much people are being affected by President Trump and Elon Musk policies, if you will, in a state like Wisconsin.
And on the Republican side, we turned to former Tem Pawlenty spokesperson Brian McClung.
I know that, for Democrats, this is like a sign of life. And that just shows you how low the Democratic Party had gotten.
However, in the final weeks of the campaign, Crawford largely turned the race into a referendum on Musk, whose group spent up to $25 million supporting Brad Schimel.
Brian, do you think this causes the Republicans to reassess Elon Musk's role at all?
Well, I hope so. Elon Musk hurt the Republican in this race. This might be an opportunity for the Trump White House and Trump's political operation to kind of use what happened in Wisconsin to pull Musk back.
Crawford won this race by double digits, thanks in part to a surge in Democratic turnout in places like Madison and Milwaukee.
If President Trump or the Republicans continue down this road, then I think it could be trouble in the midterms.
It is something to think about and watch, but for me, it doesn't necessarily foretell what's going to happen in the midterms.
There were also two special elections in Florida last night for the U.S. House of Representatives, and Republicans won both of those seats, although by smaller margins than President Trump won those districts in November. So these were significant elections last night, Julie, but of course the midterms are a long way away.
I know so much can happen, as we've seen, between now and then, but this was a pretty decisive win, a 10-point win for Crawford. And so did Jeff or Brian speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think they said that in those terms, the fact that it was a double-digit victory was very significant and just does show maybe what some voters in this swing state feel about President Trump and Elon Musk. But of course, this is kind of a unique election. Crawford outperformed Vice President Harris significantly in a lot of counties.
Wow, so Democratic vote, they were motivated in Wisconsin. And that seems to be a recurring problem for Republicans, that if Trump is not on the ticket, their voters might not show up.
That is something I think a lot of Republican strategists are trying to figure out before the midterms, that even without President Trump specifically on the ballot, how do they find those voters and get their base motivated?
All right. Thanks so much, Danny.